Happy Saturday, everyone. DQ Debrief, episode 11. So excited to have a new guest on this week. Got my Think Dyslexia shirt on. Hey, let's hop on and do this. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. This is my first ever IG live. Oh my gosh. First time for everything.
This is so exciting. Okay, so am I saying your name right? Marcia?
Yeah.
Perfect. So excited to finally chat with you live, because I know that we've been emailing and just all this awesome stuff. So thank you so much for finding the time, first of all, because this is such an important topic to both of us. And those of you who do know, I do this show every single week. So Marcia is episode 11. And as most of you know, being a Black educator, I always want to put the spotlight on Black and African American and just people of color with dyslexia, because it's not a whitewashed learning disability, right? We need to bring this to the forefront. So Marcia, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and share a little bit about who you are. And this is just a free flow of just what do you want to share about your dyslexia story? The spotlight is on you.
Okay, so greetings everybody. What time of the day it is, just greetings. So my name is Marcia Brisset Bailey, and I'm an educator as well. I've been in education for the last 30 years. I'm a qualified careers advisor. I don't know, in the States they call it a careers counsellor. But so I've done that for 11 years with post-16, which is the 16 to 19-year-olds. I've worked in higher education. I've worked in what you call kindergarten. I think I've worked across the whole sector of education. And I'm currently working in the local authority to support and empower parents who have got children with special education needs and also young people. So where do I start my story? I am dyslexic, and I've been dyslexic all my life, I guess. But what I think is really important to say, I can't speak for everybody's dyslexia lived experience and journey, even as a Black woman. And why I say that, and that's where the intersection comes in, is that your race, your colour, your environment, your education experience, they all have an impact in a different way. So all of those intersections have a different way of operating in the day-to-day in terms of what you're exposed to. And I know for myself, living in London, I grew up in London, what we'll call East London. If you ever heard of EastEnders, if you're in the States or something like that, it's as close as that. I can do a bit of East End, but I'm not going to, but I'm a real East End girl. So I grew up in East London. You would have said at the time in Hackney, it was a deprived area. So have that in your imagination. And then I grew up with my grandparents, and we're from my grandparents' heritage, they're from Jamaica. Okay. So that's a Caribbean. So they're immigrants to the UK. But I was born here. Now, my grandmother used to say, and a lot of us in the UK and probably other people, you've got to work twice as hard. So this is the intersection. So already I'm about 7, 8, and they're telling me you've got to work twice hard. I'm not thinking, what are they talking about? So they're preparing you about what their exposure is to, having to work hard as Black people. And it has to be twice as hard, because there were lots of signs in the 50s and 60s in the UK, no dogs, no Irish, no Blacks. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but that was the reality for them. So they want the best for their children, and that was that. So I'm just giving you that. I'm setting the scene. I like to tell stories, but I'm just giving you this a scene set. So, okay, I'm at school now. So I'm about 9, 10. You remember, I've got that set in the scene. My granddad's teaching me African history. You've got my grandma saying you've got to work twice as hard. And I'm at school, loving school. You've got to follow the rules. You've got to be obedient, because it's all about respecting my Caribbean upbringing for me. It's all about being obedient, follow the rules, don't get yourself in trouble. So I've got all that thinking about buzzing in my head. And I'm loving school, but I didn't feel like school loved me. And why I say that is I just couldn't write anything. I couldn't put the words down. But it was all in my head. I could visualize words, but it's why can't I'm trying to write, but why is it not coming out the way my friends is coming out? Why is it I'm getting red markers? And I feel like I can remember that it was yesterday. And then the worst one, and where the trauma came, is when they're asking me to read aloud. And I just wanted I wanted the floor to swallow me up. I just wanted to hide, and I would you know, I just would do anything to try not to read.
Right.
You know, just hoping the bell would go, anything. And that's when the anxiety, and anxiety really is fear. A child should not be feeling fearful at school. School should be nurturing you. It should be a place where you're learning. You have to go to school. That's what the law says. From the age of 5 in the UK, you have to go to school. But I was feeling like school didn't love me. So I tried to be invisible. And what I mean by that, I selectively muted, and I decided that if I didn't speak, no one would notice me.
Wow.
It's crazy to think, but obviously no one's not going to notice me. But I just thought so.
Right.
It really led to my mum really being concerned. And in those days, you could go right up to the headmaster's office and knock on the door and say whatever. So my mum came with all the drums. She's like coming along. My daughter's not reading. We need to help her. And I had a psychotherapy test, and they thought something was happening more in the home rather than my learning. And the reason why I wasn't learning, this is sometimes the intersection or the stereotypes of Black children. Mm-hmm. You know, I wasn't a behavioural child, so I wasn't excluded, but I was a child which wasn't speaking. So behaviour is obviously a form of communication. So something must have been going on at home.
Wow.
So, but it was happening at school. So I went on with that for a long time. So I was very traumatized by school, really, really traumatized. And I just wanted to share that this is still real for some children. The system is not set up as inclusive we'd like to think it is, because I'm not disabled by design. I'm disabled because of the structures and the infrastructure of the society. So I learned visually, I chunk words, I learned words as a whole, but I didn't start reading until 10. And because I taught myself to read.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I learned some things from school, like, you know, the basics and the connecting words. But there was other things I just couldn't read it. And it's just, I don't even go into it. So just to get my story finished to the end so we can ask any questions or anything. So it's when the ends of, I don't know if it would be called now year 6. So I would have been 10, 11. They sat my parents down because I'm transitioning what we would call secondary school. I don't know if it's called high school, but it was secondary school. So you go on to 11 to when you're 16. And they said to my parents that I'm not going to academically achieve. So they've just written me off. And in my head, I thought, I've grown up. Remember the intersectionality. My parents said you've got to work twice as hard. So I've got this already resilience that's not me. Who are they talking about? They ain't me. I'm not going to academically achieve. I was struggling, and I know that I was daydreaming a lot because I couldn't connect with what the teacher was saying.
Exactly.
So I went through secondary school. It was a bit of a blur, and I didn't come out with really much qualifications, which you should do. So something was obviously wrong. And it was only when I went to college, my politics teacher said to me, Marcia, you're amazing, you're articulate, but what you're saying, and I'm getting everything you're saying, but when you're writing it down, it's how you're articulating yourself, it's not coming down on the paper. I think we need to do a test for you. Usually I choke out by now, and I'm not, so it's really good. I went for this test. I remember the lady was Jenny McWhinney, and she tested me. She said, you're dyslexic. And I just thought, for the first time in my whole life, there was a name to what I was going through.
So this was in college?
Yeah. And I'm one of the lucky ones. Some of my peers in my network say to me it wasn't until they went to university they were diagnosed. So I struggled. I masked, I copied, I found 10 templates to find my way. I almost felt like I was hacking the system. I had to do something else to be able to be creative, to find my way in the world of education. So that's kind of sort of where it begins. And I thought, when I knew it was dyslexia, that's when I thought, wow. But then when you're trying to find your tribe or your network, there was no one who looked like me. No one understood. No one understood what dyslexia was. Dyslexia say, you can't learn. So everyone felt sorry for me. And I think one of the things that I will say, I'm really fortunate. My parents gave me a lot of love. So love was really what helped me a lot, to feel loved, feel cared for. They believed in me, and that helped me.
Yeah.
So it was only until I was 16, and that was it. From there on, it was the world is my oyster. I grabbed onto the dyslexia, and it wasn't defining me, but it was my route to connect and find anything that I could get to help me to achieve. And then I ended up achieving 3 degrees. And I did my master's 2 years ago in special education and disability. And it's like, oh gosh, I'd love to do a PhD, but it is hard because the system, again, is not structured and designed. If I could write my thesis or something like that, I mean, talk my thesis,
Right.
I think I would get an A. But there's certain things in our system, you know, we're still, industrial revolution's gone, but we're still setting up children and young people to prepare like we're going for factory work.
Right.
We need to be more initiative and more different ways of learning, like play until you're like 7 or 8. Play is a great way of learning.
Yes.
So yes, trauma is definitely part of my story. I'm so glad I haven't choked up, because it feels like it was yesterday, and you know, and it's not. And I know that we just need to change that. I'm so passionate about advocating and also having people who look like me to talk about it. So it's really, really important that we, you know, it's not just one look.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that people are aware of that, you know, because there's other layers and other kind of layers it to. So, you know, the twice as hard for me was my gender, so it might be harder, then the colour of my skin, and then you've got a disability. What? Are you having a laugh?
Right.
You know, this is a lot of challenges, whether it's in the education sector or in the workplace. So I'll leave it there, so you've got a bit of an overview.
I love that. I love how you gave us like the context. And you know, I have to say, all of the things you mentioned, twice as hard, you know, like Black folks needing to, all that's here in the States as well.
Okay.
I mean, it's really, I think it's really everywhere, to be quite honest with you. But I know here, as an American educator, as a Black woman, you know, as a Black mother, I mean, I was told that growing up as well. And for me, I am not dyslexic, but I struggled in school, and very similar to you, I got my diagnosis with ADHD. Actually, I was 21, and it really made sense. And so kind of hearing your story, and also I have a really good friend who is Jamaican, so I understand the Caribbean culture of respect and school and all of that, and it plays into it.
It does.
So I feel like I do have a question in regards to like your grandparents and your mom and all of that. Do they understand what dyslexia is? Like, did they understand when you got that diagnosis? Oh,
No.
okay.
No.
So how did they know? Like,
okay, so you know when you're at your cousin's house, you're at your granny's house. I set the scene. You're at your granny's house, and you've got all your cousins, and then someone decides to read, and you're thinking, oh my god! But I couldn't do that. I'm not going to read aloud, because that was probably my worst nightmare and fear. So you've got this cousin who can really read. He's reading like the dictionary, and you're like, oh my god, okay, it's your turn. No way. And he's like, I'm stuttering, because that's how I thought the phonics is what we had as well, the sounding thing, but that just didn't work for me. So that's how at school they called me stutterer, because I thought if I sounded out the word singly, then the word would come. But it didn't. It didn't come. I didn't learn that way.
So, yeah, actually, okay, so I know I asked about your parents.
Yes, I was, yeah.
And I know,
but I just wanted to add to that with my parents. So what's happened since? So when I was a tutor, my mum came to the college where I was working, and she did a counselling course. And then I was helping my mum, and then I realised my mum had the same. I said, Mum, I think you're dyslexic. Because she's going, but can you do it like this? And we were getting some clashes going on. I'm like, Mum, I can't do this. I'm finding it overwhelming. So my mum got diagnosed, and she go for assessment, and she got diagnosed as dyslexic. So we know it's genetic. So my mum believes that my grandma had difficulties with learning, but you know, you just never know what was there. So my mum, my daughter, we're 3 of us, 3 Black girls and women, we're all dyslexic. So So that's,
but I was
just
going
to give
to
you a
say,
bit.
but now you know how to support your daughter, you know, and I think that's the thing. Like, each generation doesn't, you know, we do better, we know better. You know, when we actually know what's going on, then we know how to support our kids. And I think that is so powerful. And that is, you know, one of the main reasons why I have this platform and the show, because like hearing everyone's story, I mean, honestly, if I were to do a whole study on all these stories, all of the themes are, you know, there was one person or parents that was like that support, that rock, that love. And then you find out like they were dyslexic too, so that's why they understood.
But my mum masked it. My mum masked it. You would never know all the little things. Oh, Mas, can you just write a little letter? So I just wanted to make her proud. So I'd learn how to write a letter like, dear sir, dear madam, or yours sincerely, your fair. I read it. Those days you had to go to the library. So I learned how to do these things because I wanted to show my mum I could do it, but not knowing my mum didn't know how to do it. It's really a paradise. It's really interesting. How my mum covered that all those years.
Right. And it's like the way that you learn to cope, based on society, based on the way you look, like you said, that intersectionality of like, as a Black woman, as a British woman, as a Caribbean woman, like all of these things.
All of these, they're layers that you mustn't talk, you mustn't tell people your business. So how could I tell the teacher that I'm meant to be respected? But miss, I don't understand. How do I do that? It's so confusing and complex. And these are the conversations we should have, because it also happens in the workplace. That you don't feel you can tell the manager because he's the sir. It's so, and it's those behaviours that you're carrying and it doesn't help you, but it becomes another barrier.
Right. And so what is your stance on, because I have talked to some adults that have dyslexia about work, what's your stance? Do you feel like you need to share right away if you start a new job, hey, I want to let my boss know I'm dyslexic, or do you wait a little bit? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So in the UK, we've got something called the Equality Act. So in using that Equality Act, it has gender, sexual orientation, marriage, and all sorts of things. It's got a whole list of discriminations that you can't within the workplace. So my words have gone, because that's another thing with dyslexia. You have the thoughts in your head, but they don't come out through your... I'm doing that a little bit. So I call it my gibberish. So I know what I'm trying to say, but if we just say the Equality Act. So I've always, because when I was 16, I found out, for me, it's just standard, but I know some people don't. So I disclose from interview point, so I can get the adjustments I need, which we should be advocating for more, that we should see the questions, all sorts of things, because you can get anxiety, triggers happen. So I disclose from the beginning. So from job point, from the application stage, I'm saying that I'm dyslexic because I'm thinking of all of the reasonable adjustments I might need, and I'm asserting myself to say, this is me and this is how I'm going to show up. If that's not for you, it's absolutely fine, but these are the things I need for when I come for the interview, and I need to have in place in order to give me a fair chance to have the same equal access as my peers.
And I think that is definitely something I want the audience to really sit on, because I think if we just say, oh, I'll just figure it out or whatever, like you said, that can trigger some things, that can bring up some trauma. But I also think the bigger thing is, we or you, I should say, because I'm not dyslexic, you need to know your accommodations. So I think there's that education around that. If a person just gets their diagnosis, let's say they're 25 and they just started a job, they may not really understand everything that they need. And so I know that is also a journey too, where I think depending on the family, the culture, the tradition, there's shame around it.
100%.
There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of like, well, I didn't learn to read till I was 10, like you said, which I'm still fascinated you taught yourself how to read. Like that. Because
I learned by the pictures. So the first book I learned was really easy. Oh gosh, it's gone from my head. Dr. Seuss. I've forgotten the book now. And I just learnt by the words, and because it rhymed, and it was repetitive in a way that helped me to, because I learnt the words as a whole word. So thing, that. It wasn't so I had to manually teach myself the whole word. So I couldn't read it, but I read it by visual.
Right. That's
and I still do that now. I see a word. I don't know how anybody else does it, because that's just the way I do it.
That's so interesting. That really goes to show just how brilliant you are. Like, and I know dyslexics think outside of the box. So the fact that you taught yourself that, because me, I'm Morton Gillingham trained, and I know how to break down the phonemes and the 6 components of structured literacy and all that to teach dyslexic kids to read. So hearing you many years ago, just like looking at a word, you're like, okay, that's thing, I got it in my head. That's amazing. That is amazing.
Thank you. I thought it was quite good, and that's how I taught my daughter. So when she did the spellings test, she was getting a 10 out of 10, and because it's not hacking the system, but if you learn a different way, why not? Why not?
Right.
All this or chunking. So like, because I might say there's B in there, you might say you is, so then you can visually remember different letters or different other words in the words that you can then remember how to put it together to make another words. And so she really didn't have struggles in that way, and that's the way I taught her. I tried to do it with my son. He's a bit different, but it helped her, and I just thought, well, if it works, why not? It's not the way the school's teaching you. But just to go back with my daughter, my husband and I still had to fight for 2 years for her to get a diagnosis. So even when you're aware, there is still something. It's because I'm a bit more assertive and I keep them pushing. So just think, if I'm aware and I got through in the end 2 years later, what if a parent is kind of, because you're an expert on your child. Don't get me wrong, there are professionals, but an expert in terms of knowing something about your child, if they're hiding things or they're feeling quite. I mean, I always got my daughters in par with her peers. So but can you imagine she had the right intervention support? What the possibilities are.
Right.
You keep telling me she's with her peer, she's in they still do that, but I still keep fighting. At secondary school and high school, it's even more difficult. So this tells you the system's just not right. It's like we need to start again with all of this learning, have different styles. I've seen children who are at the top of the class, and I've been in the classroom, but they struggle in group work.
Yeah. It's just interesting to hear your perspective. Me being an American and you being in the UK, like I always thought it was better over there. Like hearing how diagnosis and systems and all of that, and I guess it's the grass is greener on the other side. And some of the interviews I've done, so there's a friend of mine who is from Ghana, and her story was very sad, and pretty much everyone gave up on her except for her boyfriend, and she got diagnosed, I think, in Switzerland, which for me, I was thinking, okay, that's a mostly white country. Yeah. And then there was another friend from Oman who I think got diagnosed in the UK. Yeah. And again, I was like, I mean, I know there are obviously Black folks and Caribbean folks and African folks in the UK, but I always think, like, the person I think of is like mostly white people. And so, like, for me, I'm like, here in the United States, a lot of what, in my career of working with dyslexics, my first private school I worked in, I was the first Black teacher hired. And it was mostly white kids. And this was like when I didn't know much about dyslexia. I mean, I had all the resources to learn how to teach the kids, but I was like, is this just a white people? Like, that's how ignorant I was to that. And I think a lot of it is because we don't talk about it. I mean, we're talking about it now. Yeah. But it's the kind of thing where I always assumed, oh, everything's better in the UK. The education, the diagnosis, all that kind of stuff. But you're kind of proving me wrong.
But I do understand what you're sharing in terms of Ghana and Oman. And that's another topic in itself about those perceptions and how they're taught and the kind of colonial kind of thing, but I'm not going to go into that. But in terms of sort of those systems, they're very traditional systems. So it's not my expertise to say, but I know, like you, have got lots of friends and they didn't get their diagnosis until they came here or in the UK or wherever else they've come. So it's not that. There is hope. To some extent, you will get this, but you have to fight for it, if you see what I mean, for some people. But again, if we have this intersection, it's not everyone's experience. They get it straight away from when they're age 5. But that's not my experience. And I know it's not my daughter's experience. They didn't even notice it because she was able to mask through. But I was seeing when we're reading our books, and we've got a book called, it was Floppy and Chip, and she's asking me what's floppy again. I knew she wasn't sounding those words. She wasn't recognizing those words, and I'm like, I was like getting a bit front. I was like, but and then I was thinking, okay, step back, mum, come out of the mum head. There's something happening here. We're seeing the pattern, and we need to sort of, and at the first year they said no, she's getting the same as her peers. In the second year, I said no, we're not doing this anymore.
I just, and I know we're coming to the end of the show, but this is something I really want to explore. So there really is a common theme. I don't know how many interviews I've done over the last year and change, but I feel like the interviews I've had with people of color, they are all diagnosed either like in high school or in adult age, and there are more white folks that are diagnosed at like 5. or 6. And it really begs the question, like, what is that? I mean, that's not a very like research question, but you know what I mean? Like, I mean,
we'd have to break that down. You would have to break that down. There is something about it and those perceptions. As I said, that, you know, if we look at the exclusion rate and look at the groups who are excluded, whether it's young black boys or marginalized communities, then you're getting a picture of what could be the reasons, and some parents not being aware, understanding. So,
well, and that's, it's understanding. It's also the stigma.
Yeah,
I know here in the United States, if you label a black boy with behavioral issues and all of a sudden he's going to have an emotional disability instead of maybe there's a reading disability.
Yeah.
And that causes, you know, then that goes to the pipeline, the prison to pipeline system.
100%. So what's it, 50% are in prison? So it's so there's more of that intersection. There's lots of layers. That it is a research piece, and I would love someone to do it. It's a real research piece because there's more to it. 100%.
Really
so
is.
I think we know what some of it's about.
Yeah.
It's another conversation. We know what some of that's about, and it's not, it's not rocket science. It's not new. We know some of our journeys, and historically, you know. So, you know, we talk about diversity. That's about everything. Inclusion, equity. You need more equity in inclusion. We need more of that in education, shall I say?
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
We need to uplift people and give people opportunities, and we need to be listening more to the children. Just like I shared in my experience, no one was listening to me that I'm not speaking. They're listening to me to think there's something happening at home. Already as a young black girl growing up in the East End, that's, you know, I was a statistic. I was a statistic waiting to happen. I didn't get my GCSEs. I'm a statistic, but I changed that narrative because I just said, no, I'm not doing that. You know, my ancestors worked so hard. I'm not going to be a statistic because that teacher told me I would never academically achieve. I mean, can you imagine the trauma of someone telling and having to live through that and having self-sabotage, you know, imposter syndrome? Those are the systematic barriers that I've done that. That's not my doing. If I was that creative child, just learning to be me and, you know, being authentically, but no, we had standardized testing. You're testing my memory, but you're testing my memory. And that's like, I can't remember some of the things like you just told me now, you know.
Right.
You know, unless it's in a way that I can put it in a way to help me to achieve. There's things I know I would have got an A in if you could have done it in a different way.
Exactly. No, I 100% agree with you.
So it's our system. It's our system. It needs to be different. It needs to give equal opportunities to learn in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, and I will say for me, I scored a very low score on my SATs. And if you looked at my statistics of my SAT scores to get into college and my grades and all that, I would look like I wasn't smart. And for me, I know my way of showing mastery is talking.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
Able to communicate. Like, I actually have to think. I have to talk to someone to get my thoughts out, because sometimes I'm talking and like I'll talk to my husband, and you know he knows at this point I'm processing. Like that's the way that I process. And I think for me, like with the traditional way, kind of similar to you, if I'm given multiple choice questions, I'm like, I don't know, is it B? Like I want to expand on this. I want to be able to write it out. Like, no, don't put me in this little box of A, B, C, D.
Totally. I have to keep reading the question over, and that's taking up time because I'm thinking, well, you said it like this, and then, it's a lot. And so if we could change or make change to the system, that's the key. A lot of children are suffering because the structure is just not working for them. And we need to be more, I can't say the word, but innovative, that's the word, and more creative. We need to let young people play and use their imagination, you know, create entrepreneurs. Why not? Why do we have to be just doing, we've got to get to this bit to do this bit? Why don't we start from very early? My son said to me, Mummy, they're creating employees, not business owners. Why are we learning?
Love that. Wow, that's
at school. Yeah, he's bored because he needs something else. He's more of a kinesthetic. He's more of a doing. I can see it. And I said, son, you just need to get through this. We'll work through. I'll do all the enrichment outside of school. And for some of our children, they're bored. This is whether you're neurodiverse or not. They're bored because it's just the same. We need to be up with the times. Using the computer or technology. It's not cheating. It's a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I love this conversation, Marcia. And you know what? I would love for us to do a part 2. I sometimes do part twos, because I know we only have 30 minutes and a lot of it is because I want people to absorb. I'm trying to chunk my episodes. They used to be an hour long, and I'm like, no, let's keep it 30 minutes. So I would love to invite you on to another episode.
I'd love to. And you know, I've got the book coming at some point.
I cannot wait to read your book. I cannot wait. Well, those of you, thank you so much for joining live, and definitely DM us if you have any questions, and we will be back for a part 2.
We will.
And definitely download the Think Dyslexia app, because I put all of these episodes there. You can become a member for free. There's tons of free content on there, and I look forward to connecting with you. I'll share this video with anyone later on too who you feel like might want to hear it. So thank you, Marcia, and I hope
thank you for having me.
I said I hope you have a good evening, because it's 5:30, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I've done it, my first ever IG. Yay! And I've done it with you. Think Dyslexic. Yay!
I love it. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.